Hello everyone, welcome back to the Recovery Channel. Last week I told you I was going to talk to you about why emotional dysregulation matters when it comes to addiction and recovery. I kind of blew past that, so I just wanted to circle back on that real quick, and then we'll get to what we can do about it when we get dysregulated or just need some help getting through intense emotions. How we handle our emotions matters because if we don't do something to lower the intensity level, it could lead to relapse. If you are super angry or deeply depressed, or for me, feeling rejected, that's a big push in the wrong direction on what I call the sobriety resilience scale. More on that later, but the point here is that strong emotions can push us toward relapse. So the next logical question is, what can you do about your intense emotions? I'm glad you asked. This week, we're going to talk about another set of DBT skills that are focused on emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is exactly what it sounds like, learning to control our emotions, especially when we are dysregulated or our emotions are intense. We're going to start out with a brief discussion of something called wise mind, and then we'll get to a practical set of tools for dealing with our emotions. The premise of wise mind is that our brain has two major sides, the logical side and the emotional side. The logical side is practical and task-oriented. It rationally assesses the facts and makes decisions based on what is logical without taking into account values or feelings. The emotional side is the opposite. It looks at things strictly by how they feel. Decisions are made based on feelings and emotions, which could vary based on mood and impulsivity. For the old school Star Trek fans out there, think Mr. Spock versus Dr. McCoy. Now, when I was first learning about this, my thought was, well, duh, of course you want to be in logical mind. That's the one that makes sense. What's next? But the idea of wise mind is that wisdom comes from a balanced approach of tapping into both sides of the mind. You approach decisions using a healthy balance of logic and emotions. What? How do emotions help? Don't they just get in the way? Well, think about a situation like needing to put your dog down because it's very old and can't control its bowels. It doesn't have much longer to live, it's really not enjoying life, and it's becoming really inconvenient for you and the family. The logical thing to do would be to take it to the vet and have it put to sleep as soon as possible. And do it while the kids are at school to avoid the time-consuming and ultimately useless conversation. Logical. But what's going to happen when the kids come home from school and the dog's gone? How's that going to impact them? How are they going to feel about you? Duchess has been a part of the family for their whole life. Wouldn't it be more compassionate to give them a few extra days with her to say their goodbyes and get some closure? Maybe even have a funeral afterward and put up a little tombstone in the backyard, even though it messes with the aesthetics of the garden? When my wife was learning about wise mind, she was on the other side of it. Of course you make decisions based on feelings. That's why God gave us instincts. What matters is how it's going to make people feel, because that's what life's all about. Keeping relationships intact and doing everything you can to help people feel good. That actually sounds pretty good to me, even if I'm more on the logical side. But decisions based strictly on emotions are not optimal either. The point here is to find balance, like most things in life. If you are too far on one side or the other, try to temper that and gain wisdom from taking a more balanced approach. Let's talk about our emotional regulation tool now. I'm going to start out with a caveat because it's important. So important, in fact, I'm going to say it again at the end of the video. The tools I'm going to give you today, as with many of the tools in the DBT playbook, are meant to get you through a given situation where impulsively reacting to your emotions could lead to issues. It is important for you to consciously acknowledge that is what you are doing. I just need to get through the next 20 minutes without reacting to this feeling I'm having so I don't say or do something I'm going to regret. Once the situation is past, you need to think about why the emotion happened in the first place and why it was so intense. Then journal about it, talk to a friend about it, or better still, talk to a therapist about it. You do not want to get in the habit of stuffing, ignoring, or pushing away your feelings. These tools are meant to get you through difficult situations, not to ignore your feelings. When you have some sobriety, those emotions are going to start bubbling up more often because you're not numbing them with your addiction. It's likely that those emotions have something to do with your addiction in the first place, which is why it's a good idea to journal about them and share them with the therapist. All right, with that caveat out of the way, let's talk about the tool. As I said, this is a very pragmatic process, and it even comes with a flowchart. When you first start using this in real-life situation, the process takes a bit of thought as you mentally go through the steps. but with a little practice, and I say this from experience, you'll actually be able to get through it in a matter of a few seconds, and you will find yourself reacting to situations differently. The first step in the flow is to notice that you're having an emotion. This is why I spend so much time talking about mindfulness and telling you to practice it. Mindfulness helps us pay attention to what's going on inside, both in our body and in our thoughts. We can't get a handle on our emotions if we don't recognize we're having them. So, keep up the mindfulness practice and pay attention to what's going on within yourself. And remember, sometimes a bodily sensation is the first indicator that something is going on. For me, I can tell I'm fearful or angry if my ears get hot. If I get a sick feeling in my gut, that's typically dread or rejection. If what you're feeling is intense fear or anger, it's important to stop. Stop, as in stop and put in a pause. Take a step back and breathe. Observe what's happening within you, and then proceed with awareness, which is what I'm about to teach you how to do. In the observation step, try to figure out a more exact emotion it is that you're having. Get familiar with the feelings wheel we provided back in week 5 to give yourself some options to use besides happy, angry, or sad. See if you can get a little more granular, like for angry, you might actually be resentful, disgusted, or annoyed. Once you have the emotion identified, the next step is to check the facts. It's important to understand that our brain is constantly making up stories based on past experiences, especially the traumatic ones. We'll get more into that in future videos, but for now, just recognize that our emotions are often based on the story we're telling ourselves, not the actual situation. I remember when my wife and I were separated, we were on a Zoom call with our couples therapist. I noticed my wife looking off to the side, and it looked like she was sending a text or something on her phone. I got so pissed. Why the flip are you sending a text when we're supposed to be trying to put our marriage back together? Who is that is more important than me right now? Is that some new guy that's waiting in the wings? I totally blew up and said some not very kind things. Turns out she was taking some notes on what the therapist had just said so she wouldn't forget. Man, did I feel like a toad. And I couldn't take back what I had said. The words were out there. In that situation, if I had taken a moment to check the facts, I could have saved myself a lot of embarrassment, and I wouldn't have said things that I regretted saying. What were the facts? The only thing I knew to be a fact was that my wife looked off to the side and appeared to be doing something with her hands. That's it. The rest of it was all created by my very imaginative, storytelling brain. And we all do this all the time. That's why the important first step in this process is to stop and assess if we are reacting to the actual situation or are we reacting to the story that our brain is telling us. We do that by playing Sergeant Joe Friday. Just the facts, man. We ask ourselves what is actually true about what is going on right now that is an absolute provable fact. Now that we've quieted the noise and are looking at just the facts, we ask ourselves if the emotion and its level of intensity is appropriate. It's okay if it's not. We're not going to judge ourselves for having the emotion. That part's out of our control. But what we do next is in our control. What we're going to do next is answer the question as to whether or not the emotion fits the situation, and then make a decision as to what to do next. If the emotion does not fit the situation, then we probably shouldn't act on it. The better course of action would be to think, okay, I'm having this emotion right now and it doesn't really fit the situation. Rather than acting on the emotion, I'm going to see if I can change my mindset. What would be a more appropriate emotion to be having right now? In the example I gave with my wife, maybe a more appropriate feeling would be curiosity or confusion. I'm curious as to why she'd be looking away and doing something while we're having this heavy conversation. If I can successfully change my thoughts to fit the facts, then my next action will be more in line with the facts. If I'm curious rather than angry, I might ask a question rather than having an angry outburst. Hey, I noticed you doing something off to the side while we were talking. I'm just curious as to what you were doing. Now, I can sense the smirks going on out there right now, and you'd be right in thinking, yeah, right. I'm going to go from being angry to calmly asking a question in a matter of a few seconds. It takes our bodies about 20 minutes to calm down from being angry. The chemicals that get released in our brain and in our body take that long to dissipate. So, more realistically, it's better to just not say anything if we know we're angry and it's not really appropriate. If the person we're talking to is safe, we can even say, look, I'm pretty triggered right now, and I own that it's not really appropriate. I just need a few minutes to calm down before I can have the rest of this conversation. Now, let's say in your situation that the emotion is appropriate. The person you're talking to is clearly annoyed, and they're hurling insults at you that you're lazy and useless. You stop, assess the facts, and determine that, yeah, me being angry right now is absolutely appropriate. The next step on this branch of the flowchart is to then ask yourself, will acting on this emotion be effective? If I respond angrily to this person, is that going to help my situation or hurt it? In the case of anger, I can tell you that 99% of the time, the answer is no. Nothing good comes out of acting on anger. The best thing you can do if you are intensely angry is to remove yourself from the situation. You can respectfully say, look, I'm getting angry right now, and I know that anything I say or do at this point is only going to make things worse. So I'm going to respectfully step away right now, and we can try this again when we're both calmed down. It may not feel good to do that, but I promise you the outcome will be better. You cannot take back the hurtful things you say and do out of anger. It is always better to walk away. We've spent a lot of time talking about anger because that's the one that usually gets us in trouble. But what if the emotion is fear or sadness? What does this process look like in that case? Let's say my pet died. I seem to be hung up on dead pets today. I feel sad, intensely sad even. I notice that I'm intensely sad, run through stop, and I check the facts. Well, my pet died. Definitely not making up stories there. Check. Does my emotion fit the facts? Yeah, I'd say so. I love that little guy, and now he's gone. Next step. Would acting on my emotion be effective? Well, let's see. What I really want to do is just lie in bed all day and eat ice cream. It's Saturday and I don't have anything planned, so it won't hurt anything. And it's healthy to mourn a deep loss. So yes, actually spending the day in bed would be effective. Let's roll with it. And we're going to continue to be mindful. The following Saturday, after taking the week off of work and spending it in bed, I'm still sad. It's still fitting, but now when I ask myself if lying in bed all day would be effective, I have to be honest with myself and say no. I've spent the whole week in bed, and I've done a lot of mourning already. It's time to get back to my life. But I'm still sad. So what am I supposed to do? This is where the DBT tool called opposite action comes in. We basically do the opposite of what the emotion would have us do. In this case, I want to lie in bed all day and feel sad. So instead, I'm going to take the opposite action of getting out of bed and doing things. Take a shower, get dressed, get out of the house, and be social. There's also a tool called half smiling. When our smiling muscles are activated, it tells our brain that all is well and the anger or sadness subside. These tools may sound like we're denying or burying our emotions, running away from them. It's true to some extent. As I said when we started, we do not want to overuse these tools or deal with all of our emotions this way. But when the emotion does not fit the situation or it's going to cause us problems, it's okay to fight it in the short term. Once the situation has passed, we come back to it and try to figure out why we're reacting the way we are. All right, we're out of time. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Your homework this week is to do some research on the tools we talked about today. We've provided links in the comments. Then, practice using the tools. Until next week, stay strong, be mindful, and enjoy your sobriety one day at a time. See you next time.